Let's create some Mother's Day card and craft ideas that are easy to make and your mom will love. The first one we're going to make is the I Love You a Latte card. 2 curved lines connected together to kind of make a football shape with a curve in the middle to make the top of the coffee, round the bottom to make the mug and add a little handle. Don't forget to draw 2 ovals on the bottom to make a saucer, and then we're going to add the steam coming off. Start with a squiggle, layer a couple squiggles over that, and then we are going to add in 2 curly lines at the top that connect together to make a heart. Trace over that a couple of times as well as the steam, and then we're going to add in some small detailing lines. I like to just fill in a few little spots on the mug, on the saucer, the handle, and the back of the cup. Then we get to do the coloring. I chose to color in brown for my latte or my coffee. And then the only color I really want to add to the mug is a little bit of blue over those little detailing lines that we just added. You can choose to do whatever color you want on your mug, but once you are done coloring, you're going to grab a pair of scissors and cut it out. I chose to leave a little bit of like a white halo around my entire drawing. I chose a piece of colored construction paper, folded in half, and then I wrote on the mug, I love you a latte to tie in my cute little coffee theme, and then I'm going to use some liquid glue to glue it down onto the front of the card. Make sure you press it down well, count to 10 seconds so it really sticks. For the inside of the card, I cut out a white rectangle and I used my marker to write a sweet note to my mom. You can fill in any little thing you want to say to your mom here. And when you are done, use some liquid glue to glue the back of that rectangle and glue it onto the inside of the card. This card is a lot of fun because you get to use your fingerprints. Begin by folding your paper in half to create your card. And then we are going to use a scrap piece of paper to cut out our stencil for our heart. Fold that paper in half. You can use your marker to draw out the heart shape that you need, just the half of the heart, and then use your scissors to cut it out. Then you open it up and you'll have a heart that's going to be your stencil. Roll up a few pieces of tape and stick your heart down into the center of the card. Make sure you press down well so that heart is stuck on there and it's not going to slip and slide around. Then you're going to choose any color paint you would like and use your fingers to print your thumbprints and your fingerprints all around that heart. You want to fill in as much of that space as you can and overlap a little bit on the edges of the heart. After you are done printing your fingerprints all around that heart, you're then going to carefully peel the heart up off the paper. Careful not to touch any of the wet paint, make sure you pull off any of the leftover tape, and then you're going to leave your card to dry before we do our next step. And now that my card is dry, I can use a black marker to trace along the outside edge of that heart, creating a nice thick, bold black line to really make my heart stand out. And I can also use that black marker to add in some swirls and some polka dots into the empty white spaces on the front of my card. And once the outside of the card is done, flip it open and write a sweet note to your mom on the inside. Show some love to your llama mama. Let's draw out our llama, beginning with 2 long curved lines for the ears of our llama and connect those together to make the top of the head. From those ears, we're going to draw some wiggly lines down on the side to make the fur, and then add in some ear details. A circle in the center of the face for the nose with 2 eyes that are kind of far apart, a V with little curving lines coming off, and 2 rosy cheeks. And add in some accessories on your llama by drawing in a necklace as well as some tassels on the ears. At the top, I'm going to write Happy Llama Mama Day, and I'm going to underline llama and mama to make that stand out. And you can choose to draw this on a whole sheet of paper, or you can fold a sheet of paper in half and draw it on the outside like it is the front cover of your card. Grab some crayons, color it in however you would like, and remember, if you did choose to make this into a card, open it up and write a sweet note to your mom on the inside. Show your mom all of the words you think describe her in this flower painting. Cut off the bottom piece of a toilet paper or paper towel roll, bend it on the ends, and set it off to the side. Grab a marker and draw some squiggly lines in a circle to create the center of our flower. Use that cardboard piece as a stamp. Dip it into some paint, and then you're going to stamp all the petals around that circle that you drew for the center of your flower. And then finally, you're going to add in the stem and a leaf or 2 using your marker. Once that paint dries, use your marker to write in words on each petal that best describes your mom. Take some time to brainstorm some of the words that you really think best fit her, like funny, kind, beautiful, awesome, anything that's going to make her feel special. I recommend using a permanent marker to write in all of your words because our next step is we're going to add in some watercolor. I chose some yellow to begin with, and I painted in the center of my flower over those squiggly wiggly lines that I drew. I also blended in a little bit of some orange, and I did a blend of red, orange, and yellow on the petals of my flower, making sure I blended those watercolors really pretty together. And then once that is done, I then used a little bit more orange in the center of my flower. Finally, I used some green to paint in the stem and the petals of my flower, and then you can choose any color watercolor you want to do in the background. I chose to do a watercolor wash, meaning I used more water than I used of the color, and I blended together purple and blue. And this is going to create a beautiful painting that is going to make your mom feel so special. Let your mom know you couldn't wish for a more perfect mom. Start off by writing "I couldn't wish for a more perfect mom" at the top of your paper. Use your marker to draw a circle with some dots in the center of that circle, and then you're going to create straight lines coming out from around that circle. We are using these lines to create the pieces of our dandelion. Use some long and some short lines that overlap each other, and then trace around that circle a couple of times in the center, and also draw down a stem to the bottom of the paper. Next, we're going to use some watercolors to print our fingerprint around the outside edges. Get the color you would like wet, and then dip your thumb into that color and print your thumbprint all the way around, filling in some thumbprints on the outside of those lines and some on the inside. I also chose to layer some purple with this as well, and I did some thumbprints around the outside edges like it had been blown off. Then I used my watercolor and a paintbrush to paint in the yellow center of my dandelion flower and the green stem. In the open space at the bottom of the card, I wrote "I love you," but you can choose to write anything you would like here. Paint a beautiful vase full of flowers for your mom. Start off by drawing a small oval, and then add in some curving lines that come down from the side, and finish off the bottom of your vase with a straight line. Then we're going to add in the table line in the background of our picture. You're going to use some bump and jump around. We'll fill in that line in the center in just a little bit. Then draw in some leaves on the flower stems, as well as some poking out from behind the flowers. Once you are done adding in the leaves, then we're going to begin our watercolor. I like to start with the green for the flower stems first. Using a paintbrush, I'm just tracing over all those stems and then painting in the leaves. And then you get to have fun painting in the flowers any colors that you would like. One thing that you are going to focus on when you are painting in these flowers is that you don't want to paint perfectly. I'm painting kind of quickly in a squiggly motion, and it's okay if you leave a few white spaces. Our picture is intended to look a little messy. I'm also going to use some blue to paint in my flower's vase because it's full of water and it is a glass vase that is see-through. So I'm going to finish painting in my vase. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. You can leave a few white spaces, and then I'm going to choose my background colors for my picture. I chose to paint my table red and my background orange and yellow. When you're painting in these spaces, you want to paint kind of quickly using water to help blend the color around. And remember, it can be a little sloppy because our picture is intended to look a little messy. So don't worry about trying to fill in every little space, especially when it comes to those tiny little spaces in between the flowers. Once my first layer of watercolor has dried, I'm then going to go back with my Sharpie and add in that table line that I can see through the glass vase, and then I'm going to trace over my flowers. I'm going to do this kind of sloppy. I'm going to make sure that my lines don't exactly match up to the previous line that I drew. I'm going to make sure I just trace around it a couple of times, 2 or 3 loops around. I'm going to do the same thing on the vase as well as the table line, and again, I'm not sticking to the exact perfect line. I'm just kind of making a little sloppy lines that go around it just ever so slightly, and then adding in a few extra little detail lines like this. At the bottom of my picture, I wrote "I love you, Mom," and then I went back over it to make those letters nice and thick and bold so they would stand out more against the background of my picture. And then I went back with a little more watercolor to add in some more blends in the background. I chose to blend in a little more orange, and then I also wanted to make sure that that vase looked a little more realistic. Since it is a glass vase, I can see through it, so I would be able to see the background and the table through it. So I went back over the vase at the bottom with a little red, and I did a little bit of some yellow and orange at the top, so that way it would look like I could actually see through the vase, and it made my picture look just a little more realistic. And finally, I just use a little bit more of my red watercolor to go over the words at the bottom, and I also use that red watercolor in a couple of the flowers at the top of the vase just to make it pop out and stand out. Tell your mom I love you in sign language. Begin by tracing your hand onto a sheet of colored construction paper. I'm using a sheet of red and a pencil just to trace around each of my fingers, as well as going back and tracing my wrist as well. Once that is done, grab a pair of scissors and you're going to cut out your hand, making sure you're cutting out all the spaces between each finger. I also used the eraser on my pencil to erase any pencil lines I no longer needed. Grab some liquid glue and you're going to glue the hand down onto the paper, but you're not going to glue down those two fingers that are going to bend forward. So I'm just going to put a little liquid glue on the back, use my hands to rub it down to make sure it really sticks onto the paper. For the other two fingers, I'm going to put a drop of glue at the tip of each finger, and then I'm going to curl those fingers down, leaving a gap underneath them, and I'm going to hold them for 10 seconds to make sure they really stick. Once they are stuck on there, it's going to look like this, so you can see that they are curled up off the page. Then I'm going to grab a Sharpie and I'm going to write I love you mom at the top, and I chose to make those words nice and bold. And then you can add some designs around the outside edges, like I chose to use these little tick marks, and I also added a few lines around the outside edges of my hand and the fingers. And finally, add in any accessories you would like bracelets or fingernails, and add a little note at the bottom to complete your picture. Moms light up our world and we love them watts. To create this bright artwork, begin by painting your hand yellow. You want to make sure you cover your hand by squishing the paint around and making sure you're getting all the way on the edges. Once your hand is covered in yellow paint, you're going to print your handprint on a sheet of white paper. Press down on your handprint so it really sticks, and then you want to let that dry. We are going to draw out our details using crayons. Begin by drawing a heart at the center of the hand, and then we're going to draw in the bottom light bulb detail using a gray crayon, and we're going to do some zigzagging lines to create like the screwed ends of our light bulb. And then you're going to shade it in lightly with a gray and go over that gray with some black as well, just to create some more depth in that little piece and to make those little detail lines pop out. Then using a yellow crayon, trace around your handprint to create the bulb of your light bulb. And you're going to shade around that handprint with the crayon. You can use some yellows and oranges just to create a little more detail. Pressing down harder will make your colors a little darker, and light will make the colors lighter. After I finish adding in all the details and tracing around the outside edges of my light bulb, I'm then going to grab a pair of scissors and cut out my light bulb. I then use some liquid glue to glue the back of my light bulb and stick it onto a sheet of colored paper. I chose to use red. Then I'm going to grab that extra scrap piece of paper that we cut off from our light bulb. Using a yellow marker, I'm going to color a patch of yellow and then use my scissors to cut that out and then cut it into strips that I can use as little light bursts around my light bulb. Adding a drop of glue onto the back of each piece and trimming as needed, I will glue those pieces all the way around my light bulb to make it look like my light bulb is shining nice and bright. I'm going to use a Sharpie to draw in some little black tick lines around the light bulb's bright lights, and then I'm also going to trace just lightly around the outside of my light bulb and the bottom of the bulb detail, as well as the heart. And then at the bottom of the card, I'm also going to use my Sharpie to write I love you watts. Not lots, watts, because we're talking about a light bulb. I outlined around my handprint with a little orange to make my handprint pop out to complete my picture. Do you just love your mom to pieces? Let's make a card to show her just that. Start by folding your piece of white paper in half so it makes a card. Use some colorful pieces of paper to cut up some scrap pieces that we will use later. Then take a sheet of black paper and you want to match it up to your white paper. Lay your white sheet of paper on top of the black paper and use a pencil to draw the line to match up the size. Then use your scissors to cut off the top and the bottom of the black sheet as well. I chose to cut a design such as these zigzags to make it look fun and to have it so it fits better on my white paper. We're then going to cut out a heart in the center of our black sheet of paper by folding it in half and using our scissors to cut along the folded edge. Use a pencil to trace out the heart shape onto your paper. You're going to need these as guidelines so you know where to put your pieces. Once you start gluing down those colored pieces, you want to make sure that you're staying within the heart and a little can overlap. Then you're going to use some glue and glue down your black sheet on top of those pieces and grab a Sharpie to draw some little outlines along the outside edges of your pieces. Using a Sharpie and bold lettering, write I love you to pieces on the outside of the card. On the inside of the card, you can glue down some of those extra scrap pieces that you have to scatter around the inside cover as well as over onto the side page. Just make sure you leave some space to write a sweet note to your mom. Our final card has a little pop-up surprise for your mom. Using any scrap sheet of paper folded in half, cut out a heart shape that's going to be used as your stencil. You're going to trace that stencil onto folded red paper 4 times. You want to match up the top of the heart to the folded edge of the red paper. You want to make sure it's touching to the top. This is how you're going to get those 2 hearts to connect together. When you cut out your heart, you want to make sure you leave those 2 areas where they're still attached together. So when you open up your heart, it's going to look like a little book. If you cut those 2 pieces off, it's going to cause your hearts to be 2 separate pieces and not have them attached. Once you have all 4 of your pieces, choose the color paper you want to use as the background for your card, cut out a small yellow circle, and use that as the center of the flower. Then glue the back side of the hearts down around the center of the flower to create your flower petals. Use a green sheet of paper to cut out a stem and some leaves. Use some glue to glue down the leaves onto the stem. Using the heart stencil you made earlier, trim it so it's a little bit smaller. Go around the outside edges and cut some off. Then you're going to use that stencil to make 4 separate white hearts. Take a sheet of paper, fold it in half, and then you can fold it in half one more time, and then you're going to lay that black heart or your heart stencil on top and cut around it to create 4 separate hearts that you can lay on the inside of your heart petals. On those white hearts, write sweet notes to your mom and then glue down those hearts inside the red heart petals. And finally, using a Sharpie, draw some detailing lines on the leaves and the stem of your flower, as well as on the outside of those heart petals. Once you've done all of that, then use your Sharpie to draw some dots on the inside of that yellow circle and trace around the outside of the yellow circle with your Sharpie as well. And that is the final touches to complete your card.